What if the Lord's Prayer you were taught to recite at church was never meant to be a petition for a distant heaven, but a coded manual, a hidden scroll pressed into your hands to wake up the kingdom already inside you? Imagine a brittle parchment that when you breathe into it begins to unfold not across time, but through the body, each line a key, each syllable a vibration that resets a deeper memory. This is the claim I want to make with you tonight, that what we call the Lord's Prayer is at its core spiritual technology, an activation sequence Jesus offered to those who would remember how to be the temple, not just belong to one. Listen closely. I am not here to tear down faith. I am here to show you how to return to its original pulse. Institutions can honor and can ossify. They can help and they can habituate. The danger is not faith itself, but the hollowing of a living practice into rote recitation. When words lose their breath, they become ornaments. When breath returns to words, they become motors of transformation. So let us read this ancient instruction as someone handing you an implant designed to reconnect you to the source code. We will go line by line, and I will offer what I have learned in prayer, study, and inner practice, always noting when a linguistic or mystical reading is an interpretation, not a settled historical certitude. This is an invitation to remember, not a decree to replace your doctrine. We begin with the first word, the smallest word with the largest consequences, our. Do not skim past it. Most of us were taught to begin with Our Father, as if the prayer necessarily starts with possession or ownership. But our is a rupture in private spirituality. It dissolves the idea that spiritual life is a solitary transaction. In saying our, Jesus calls you into a communal field, where identity is no longer defended but shared. Think of the difference between solitary light and a shared frequency. One lamp shines alone, but when two lamps resonate together, the light multiplies in nuance and intensity. Our rewires your prayer from petition into participation. It says, this is not about my small needs alone. It is about the body of belonging that remembers itself as a single organism. This communal our is not collectivism imposed from outside. It is a discovery of shared lineage. You are being invited into a family that is not confined by genealogy or polity. It is a lineage of breathers. That is why I insist on calling this a hidden scroll. Jesus uses a social pronoun to point not simply to people, but to a field of presence that is activated when we name ourselves together. When you say our, imagine the air between you and others as conductive. The prayer becomes a connective current. Practices that only teach private petitions miss the deeper mechanic. The human nervous system is tuned to mirror, to sync. Our uses that biology as a bridge to the divine. Then comes the second hinge, Father.
Here, the texts and tongues begin to thicken, and we must be careful. One way to read the Aramaic is abun, which can carry the nuance of origin, source, maybe even the intimacy of a parent's care. Saying father in an ancient Middle Eastern context summons the home, the womb, the origin. But let me be clear, when I say this, I mean it as an interpretive lens, not as an exhaustive translation. What matters for our work is the functional shift. Jesus asks you to orient towards source, not toward a remote bureaucratic judge. Source means breath. Source means that what animates you is not merely a moral ledger, but a living current. If our toggles your prayer into network, Father/Abun reconnects you to origin movement, the rise and fall of life force. In many spiritual traditions, the first act of the divine is to exhale presence. The first human response is to inhale. In this prayer, the divine is not an object you study, it is the pattern you learn to ride. So the prayer begins as a breathing protocol. Inhale into our, exhale into Father. This patternality is the simplest spiritual tech, synchronization. In that synchronized breath, the old separation, sacred and mundane, clergy and laity, vertical and horizontal, begins to blur. You are invited to live from a place of belonging and origin simultaneously. Who art in heaven? Now the conventional reading pulls you upward, a place above, but I want you to hear this as an arrow pointing inward and upward. Heaven in the ancient mindscape is less a GPS coordinate and more a modality, a frequency. To say who art in heaven is to address the transpersonal quality of God that exists in and beyond your personality. One interpretive reading of the phrase suggests it is a pointer, not a geography. It reminds you that there is a dimension in you and beyond you that is characterized by wholeness and presence. The practice, then, is to find that dimension within the field of your body and your relationships and to bring it down, not to wish it away into some remote afterlife. If you trace the pulse of this opening triad, Our Father who is in heaven, you see the architecture: collectivity, source, presence. The prayer is scaffolding for someone learning to embody kingdom life, right here, right now. Let that sink in. The opening is not a humble preface to a petition for future rescue. It is a boot sequence to power up your inner operating system. Pause and breathe that with me now. Nothing mystical required, just a recognition. You may notice your chest soften when you move from my to our, from I to us. That's the beginning of what I mean by remembering. If this is landing in you, mark it. A small sign of covenant. Like or subscribe. Hold the line with us. We are building a field where these words are more than memory. They are method. Hallowed be thy name. Here we enter the territory where ritual and thrill meet.
Hallowed is usually translated as holy or sanctified, but listen to its operative function in this text. Instead of an abstract reverence, it acts like an instruction to make the divine name live inside the cells. There is a long tradition that treats name not as a label but as a pattern, a sonic signature. The Hebrew letters of the divine name, often rendered YHW, have been meditated upon as movements, not just nomenclature. One interpretive reading suggests that the original listeners understood divine names as vibrational keys that could be engaged experientially by breath and attention. I offer this as a poetic interpretive lens. Treat the name as frequency rather than mere noun. Imagine the body as a chamber where certain vowels and consonants set the architecture of presence. You do not need to chant esoteric syllables. Instead, you can let the prayer itself, as you speak and breathe it, carry its own vibration. Hallowed becomes practice, to let the name, the pattern of the good, the true, the life, be honored by your living. When the name is hallowed, the temple, you, is animated by that pattern. The sacredness becomes kinetic, not static. Now, thy kingdom come. This is often the point where most exegesis flattens into futurity, heaven someday, elsewhere. But consider kingdom as frequency, an operative field that can be present. Thy kingdom come is not a passive wish, it is an imperative activation. Jesus teaches participants how to call in the pattern. Kingdom as frequency means that the world does not change by entitlement, but by resonance. When the kingdom comes, it comes like a wave whose crest reorganizes the shoreline of your choices. If hallowed is the tuning of the instrument, kingdom come is the signal that plays the tune. You are being invited to hold the intent and to embody the waveform. This is where the prayer moves from poetic to technological. It becomes a protocol you can run. The early Christians may have not had our vocabulary for neuroplasticity or frequency, but they had practices that changed the nervous system and social field. This line is the activation command. Align your vessel with the pattern and let that field reorganize what you think possible. Don't rush past that. Most people say this line without knowing that it is the call to alignment. If this idea resonates with you, mark it now. A small gesture anchors you into the field. Like, subscribe, hold the space. We are acknowledging together that this is not theoretical, it is vocational. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Here is where intention and embodiment lock hands. I want to offer a fresh term, sayana. Sayana is not an ancient Greek word. It is a placeholder for the idea of active, creative will that emerges from alignment with the pattern. Too often will gets read as resignation, let God's will be done, as if human agency must bow out.
But the prayer reframes will as co-creative. The divine intention wants expression, and you are the instrument of that expression. The phrase, on earth as it is in heaven, reverses the future-only hope into a present demand. It says, make here what is there, literally. What does that life look like? It looks like decisions made from clarity instead of fear. It looks like repair instead of retribution. It looks like creativity that serves rather than consumes. It looks like small acts of right ordering, forgiveness, generosity, attentiveness, practiced until they become the new economy of your life. Thy will is not an excuse for passivity. It is a summons to disciplined, compassionate action. Practical? Yes. Consider this. Before you respond to an email, before you speak to a loved one, breathe into the question, is this choice aligned with the pattern I have tuned to? That pause is not hesitation, it is calibration. Over time, the pattern re-encodes your default reactions. The prayer thus functions as both lens and software update. Give us this day our daily bread. If the previous lines tune and align, the bread line supplies the sustenance to sustain the alignment. Bread in the Jewish imagination is presence, hospitality, and the simple economy of life. Jesus reframes bread into daily bread as more than calories. It is daily communion with what nourishes your soul. One can read this bread as spiritual feeding, the manna of presence that arrives in the present moment, and as a call to become bread for others. The secret is reciprocity. You receive and you become the medium through which others receive. We must also heed a practical humility here. This is not a promise that all material lack will evaporate on command. The invitation is to trust that when you are aligned, ingenuity, service, and provision begin to move toward you in ways you can steward. The prayer cultivates a daily discipline of dependence on presence rather than anxiety about provision. How to practice this? Create a simple rhythm, morning bread. It could be 5 breaths where you name what fuels you: clarity, courage, resource, belonging, and then ask for the capacity to be bread to someone else today. This is not magical thinking. It is embodied rehearsal for generosity. Over time, that rehearsal rewires priorities. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Here we enter the marrow of the technology. Forgiveness is not an ethical nicety, it functions as spiritual law. Consider debts as relational contracts that bind energy. Grievances loop attention back into injury and keep you tethered to the past. Forgiveness frees the current. It releases you from the feedback loop that continues to feed the wound. In practice, this is not simple or immediate, it is a process. Yet the prayer holds forth a principle. Liberation occurs when you let go.
Think of ancient debt not merely as money owed, but as karmic tension, family curses, resentments carried across generations. When Jesus teaches, "Forgive us our debts," he offers a method for unhooking. One interpretive spiritual reading frames this release as an unbinding of energetic contracts, again, a metaphor for what actually happens when you choose to forgive and thereby reroute your attention and behavior. This is not to minimize harm or to require premature absolution. The prayer calls for a deliberate practice of facing and releasing, often with boundaries and honesty intact. Many of us have been told forgiveness is forgetting. That's a cruelty. Forgiveness is remembering differently. It's reclaiming the narrative and refusing to keep the wound as your identity. That is the first transformative act of the midsection of the prayer. It undoes chains so that the vessel can carry the kingdom without the weight of old debts. And lead us not into temptation. This line has troubled readers because it seems to suggest God tempts, but the prayer's functional tone reframes the ask. Do not let us be seduced by false shortcuts. Temptation, as I teach it, is often false light, a promise of power without maturation, an invitation to premature crowns. Many spiritual seekers are hungry for sign and speed, and there are always forces willing to offer a counterfeit shortcut. To pray, "Lead us not into temptation," is to ask for guidance through the tests that will refine you rather than derail you. Temptation is not merely moral failure, it is misapplied power. It looks like healing that bypasses repentance, like influence purchased without service, like an experience promised without the interior habits to carry it. The prayer asks, "Grant us the discernment to pass tests or to be led around traps." Ask for allies, ask for wisdom, ask for the restraint that produces integrity rather than spectacle. Understand that maturity often arrives through patient resistance and steady alignment. The glorious temptations, fame, easy influence, quick validation, are thieves of depth. This petition is the tool to navigate those crossroads. Deliver us from evil. Here the prayer plants its stake, not for some demon-chasing theatrics, but for the reclaiming of identity. Deliverance is not primarily about spectacle. It is the methodical unmasking of the false selves that our wounds have constructed. You were taught stories of saints casting out devils, as if deliverance was a theatrical contest of power. This prayer recenters deliverance as therapy for the soul, the act by which you recover your original name and trajectory. When Jesus teaches this, he points to an exodus of identity. The person who has been defined by shame, by inherited narratives,
by other people's projections, is systematically called back to their center. That process is deliverance. It's a long work. It is not a single pronounced exorcism in most lives.
It happens line by line, breath by breath, through forgiveness, discernment, and the steady practice of the will aligned with the pattern. Now we arrive near the threshold of the central pivot. If we were reading an ancient scroll, the middle would be where the looms cross threads and a new image emerges. In our prayer, this is where the practice moves from instruction into application. Forgiveness unchains you. Discernment keeps you from false crowns. Deliverance begins to restore your name. The sequence is strategic. You cannot fully receive kingdom with debts unpaid. You cannot maintain the kingdom's gifts if tempted into counterfeit shortcuts. You cannot stand in your true identity if you allow inherited lies to steer you. At this juncture, the tension intensifies. The old religious systems, not the faithful people who make them up, but the rigid habits that mistake ceremony for transformation, often teach that saying the words is enough. They layers a ritual over absence and call it devotion. But this scroll, the prayer as technology, demands integration. It asks for work. It asks for breath, for attention, for the slow accretion of discipline. It asks the community to reconfigure how it moves so that every small choice reflects the pattern. And here is the pinch. You may want the kingdom without the crucible. Many long for the crown without the character. The hidden scroll refuses the short circuit. It invites refusal of the false light and offers instead a long, luminous path where power is the fruit of being reordered from the inside. So far, we have decoded the architecture: communal belonging, source orientation, present tense heaven, vibration of the name, activation of kingdom, embodiment of divine will, daily nurturing, forgiveness as unbinding, discernment in temptation, and deliverance as identity reclamation. Each of these is a lever. Each is practice, not mere doctrine. You can recite them as words and remain unchanged, or you can let them function as protocols. Breathe into hour, live from origin, tune to the name, call the kingdom, choose the will, eat the daily bread, forgive to free, refuse false light, and reclaim your true self. We must also be honest about language claims. When I speak of Hebrew letters or Aramaic echoes, I am offering one interpretive lens among many. Scholars and mystics may disagree on specifics, and that is fine. What I am pointing to is the functional truthability of the prayer. Regardless of precise etymology, these words have, in the hands of those who embodied them, operated as transformative technology. That empirical fact, that practices change people, is the test I appeal to, not unsettled philology. As we move toward the deeper work, the place where forgiveness produces freedom and deliverance consolidates a new name, I invite you to notice where you feel resistance. Is it easier to believe in future promises than present activation? Do you crave the spectacle of deliverance more than the slow labor of inner repair? That resistance is itself a teacher. It will show you the exact node where the hidden scroll seeks to pull you through. There is a danger here worth naming: spiritual bypassing. It is possible to turn these lines into self-help platitudes that cover over real pain. Saying forgive becomes a broom to sweep trauma under the rug. The scroll itself demands integrity. It cannot be weaponized for the avoidance of necessary grief. The technology is sophisticated enough to invite you into the work of grieving and reclaiming. Forgiveness is not a substitute for justice or for healthy boundaries. It is a tool for unshackling your own heart so you can act rightly in the world. We pause at this threshold because the next moves are where the prayer moves from theory to ceremony, specific practices that carry intention into the body. There are breath patterns that have been used for millennia to settle the nervous system. There are embodied rituals for releasing debts that do not bypass repentance. There are communal acts that retune the field so that kingdom frequency becomes the default. I will offer a compact set of those practices, but first I need you to be honest about whether you want the kingdom as convenience or as vocation. If you want it as a vocation, the hidden scroll will ask you to pick a practice and stick with it daily. Start small. Start with hour. Practice saying it in community, even if that community is found online or in a quiet room with a trusted friend. Move to Father/Abun,
Allow the word to be a rhythm of breath, a return to source. Let hallowed be your tuning. Call kingdom as the activation. Choose one small act that day to make the will of heaven manifest in a practical way. Eat your daily bread, and then find some way to share it. Begin the forgiveness work that releases the static, and ask for guidance away from the tempting shortcuts. These are not metaphors for later. They are the scaffolding for now. As you consider stepping into practice, prepare for disruption. Old patterns will resist. Community will test you. Temptation will offer counterfeit immediacy. That is the cost of apprenticeship. But the alternative is to keep reciting a prayer that echoes in an empty hall. The hidden scroll will not let you remain idle. We will now begin to move into the specific exercises that animate each phrase: breath patterns, brief meditative acts, communal touchstones. I will show you how to use the prayer as a morning reset, as a midday recalibration, and as an evening review that assesses where the kingdom is being lived and where debt remains. We will look at the micro gestures that carry forgiveness from idea to habit. We will learn to recognize the false lights that tempt us and to summon deliverance as a process of renaming.
But before I give you the rituals themselves, there is one more thing you must understand. The hidden scroll is not a private treasure. It works because it is shared. The frequency of the kingdom amplifies exponentially in community. The original prayer begins with "our," precisely because only together can we carry the fullness of the pattern. Solo spiritual heroism is a myth. The work of reclamation, of identity, of deliverance, of kingdom, is woven through relationships. This is why the practices I will teach are meant to be done with at least one other person, and ideally with a small group that can hold accountability and care. Now, imagine a room where 10 people breathe the prayer as a field exercise. Each voice is a node in a living grid. The hour becomes tangible. The aboon becomes a shared inhalation. The name resonates in the chamber. That room begins to hum at a frequency different from the air outside. That hum is not an ethereal novelty. It reorders nervous systems, primes behavior, and multiplies kindness. The hidden scroll is communal technology. It was never meant to be locked in a closet of private devotion. We are approaching the moment where the practical and the prophetic intersect. The next segment will give you concrete tools, step-by-step breath work, a short exercise for forgiveness that honors boundaries and complexity, and an attunement for discerning false light. It will also teach a small nightly review that helps you measure whether the kingdom's frequency increased in your day. These practices are simple but not easy. They require repetition, they require companionship, they require you to risk being known as you are. And yet there is a promise embedded in the scroll's logic. The kingdom doesn't demand perfection, it demands return. Every breath of remembering folds you back toward origin. Every act of forgiveness unhooks you a little more. Every refusal of premature power keeps your hands clean to carry the real thing. This is the work that produces being worthy of the responsibility the kingdom brings. Responsibility not as burden, but as stewardship. We will take that first practical breath together in a moment, but I need to leave a space for the gravity of what comes next. Forgiveness opens doors that temptation will try to slam. Deliverance begins to reclaim names that systems had overwritten. Embodiment of the will produces visible rearrangements in your life and relationships. The middle of the scroll is already rewriting the edges of your story. If you are still with me, you have entered a narrow gate that leads to a broader life. Hold that tension. Let the unease be a measuring stick for depth. The hidden scroll doesn't promise an easy path. It promises a real one that changes what you were taught so that you may live what you were given. In the next part, we will practice the first set of exercises that make the prayer functional in your nervous system and in your community. We will begin with a breath protocol that anchors our and abun into the body, and then proceed to a disciplined forgiveness ritual that actually releases death without denying injury. We will learn how to spot false lights and how to call on deliverance as renaming rather than simply exorcism. For now, carry this question with you. Are you willing to let the prayer be more than words? If the answer is yes, prepare your breath, choose a partner, and be ready to claim the name that is being hallowed of you. Begin with your body where you are. This is not a lecture, it is a protocol offered to the nervous system. The first practical move the hidden scroll asks for is simple.
synchronized breath that anchors the opening 3 words, the communal hour, the source sense of Father, Abun, and the pointer, who is in heaven, into living tissue. Find a partner or imagine one across from you. Sit so your spines can be soft but upright. Let your hands rest where they won't distract you. For 2 minutes, let the inhalation be attentive and the exhalation be long enough to notice shift. On the in-breath, notice hour, not as a noun, but as a widening, and on the out-breath, feel Abun as return to source. This is a practice of syncing, not syllabic magic. One way to think of Abun is as an Aramaic echo of origin. That is an interpretive lens, not a claim of philological finality. Do it again 3 times and notice what softens: shoulders, the jaw, the small anxious loop behind your eyes. These micro-returns are the technology. Breath reorders your chemistry just enough to make a new choice possible. From there, bring that breath into a 5-minute morning reset, the daily bread rehearsal. Before you open your phone, before you swallow another demand, name the sustenance you need today. Courage, clarity, patience, a small practical provision, a wise word. Say it aloud or in the privacy of your interior with the breath. Imagine the bread arriving not as a miraculous windfall, but as a mobilization of clarity and possibility around you. A door opens, a conversation softens, a small line of provision is revealed. Then imagine yourself as bread. Who in your orbit needs what you carry? Conclude the 5 breaths by committing to one concrete act. Send a message, prepare a meal, offer a listening hour. This is the reciprocal loop the prayer wants. You receive pattern, you become medium. Forgiveness is the deep engine inside the middle of the scroll, and the ritual I offer is designed to move stuck energy without demanding premature erasure. Take a sheet of paper or a private journal. Name the debt. It could be a person's betrayal, a generational story, an internal demand that keeps replaying. Write the short phrase that names the wound. Be clear, not theatrical. Then write the cost. What has this kept you from doing? What pattern has it reinforced? Allow yourself 2 minutes of naming without explanation. Naming is not condoning.
Next, imagine the debt as a cord tied to your chest. Where does it anchor? Is it shame at the throat, rage in the gut, numbness in the limbs? Hold the image without forcing resolution. Then say this aloud in language that fits you. I release this debt from being my identity. I set it down and reclaim my life. If you prefer a different formulation, shape it into plain speech. Release does not mean forgetting. It means relocating your attention and untying the knot that has kept the world organized around pain. If a boundary is required, if safety, justice, or accountability must be pursued, name that too. Forgiveness without justice is not wholeness. It is a cosmetic that leaves the wound intact. There is a practical guardrail here. Forgiveness practiced as avoidance is spiritual bypass. If you feel compelled to forgive quickly to avoid pain rather than to move through it, stop and invite a companion, a counselor, or a trusted witness to walk with you. The hidden scroll is not an escape hatch from grief. It is a method for working with grief until it reshapes you. When you've done the release language, fold the paper and carry it somewhere symbolic. Some place it in water and watch the ink blur. Some tuck it into the earth. Some keep it as an artifact of the work. The form matters less than the act of transfer. You are no longer holding the debt alone. Temptation is reframed in this program as the allure of premature crowns, shortcuts that promise power without the inner architecture to hold it. To build an attunement for discernment, create a quick 3-question diagnostic you can use the moment desire spikes or an opportunity glitters. 1. Does this ask for secrecy or quick reward? 2. Does it demand you bypass a practice that builds maturity? 3. Who benefits most if this succeeds, you or the pattern? If 2 of the 3 answers suggest shortcut, slow down. The test is not moralism, it is calibration. There are small embodied steps that make discernment usable. When an enticing offer arrives, do 1 deliberate breath and note any sudden warming in your chest or rush in your brain. Those somatic cues are early warning systems. They often precede rationalization. Then name aloud 1 anchor question. Will this choice feed the pattern I am tuning to? If the answer is unclear, consult 1 trusted person before you leap. Saints and seekers alike have been undone by applause and speed. The scroll insists on a tempo that refines rather than consumes. Deliverance, in the sense the scroll insists upon, is identity reclamation. It is not a dramatic theatricality, but a steady renaming.
Choose a small practice for reclaiming your true name. Start by listing 3 false names you have accepted: what others called you, what you called yourself in shame, the identity a wound pinned on you. Say each name and then refuse it aloud. You are not the only story I will tell.
Then choose one true name. Maybe it is beloved, creative steward, healer, peacemaker. Say that one into your palms and ask one person in your community to witness you speaking it. Witness is a theological technology. Spoken witness embeds new narrative into social reality. Let me give you a portrait to make the process concrete. There was a woman, call her Mara, who had been taught to hide anger as evidence of weakness. She carried the secret name of problem child within the family script, and that name shaped her choices. She dimmed herself so others could feel safe. In a small group practice, she did the debt ritual, naming the generational shame that tied her, and then did the renaming exercise. She spoke aloud the new name she felt the Spirit inscribe, one who speaks true. Her friend affirmed it, and the small act rippled. She began to say no to projects that consumed her, and yes to small ministries that used her voice. It did not happen overnight. The new name was tested and sometimes contradicted, but the daily discipline and the witness steadily repatterned her life. This is the non-spectacular arc the hidden scroll tends to: slow, social, and durable. A short practical deliverance ritual for your context. Sit facing a witness, hands open. Name one characteristic that feels stolen from you: the right to speak, to grieve, to rest. Speak the stolen quality back in the first person. I reclaim my right to speak. Your witness then echoes. You reclaim it. Repeat 3 times. Each echo is a social seal that helps your nervous system accept the new syllable as possible. Over weeks, these micro-seals accumulate into a changed identity. There are ethical and social considerations built into these moves. Do not weaponize deliverance to vilify a family member or to avoid necessary reconciliation. The scroll invites repair, not cheap triumph. If harm has been done, pursue justice with prayer and practice. The spiritual technology aids recovery but does not replace external accountability. Now, the community architecture. This work is designed to be done with others. A small group of 3 to 12 people is ideal. Designate roles that rotate: a holder whose task is to track safety and boundaries, an amplifier who notices where the group is getting spiritualized or avoiding discomfort, and a witness who practices the simple art of saying back what they see. Keep time-limited sessions, 45 to 60 minutes, so the work stays sustainable. Begin each meeting with a synchronizing breath: 3 rounds of shared inhalation into hour, 3 rounds of soft exhalation into a boon. Then offer one person's practice to the group for 5 to 10 minutes, followed by a short witness of 2 to 3 affirming observations. End with a small action commitment, one thing the group will do before the next gathering that embodies the kingdom frequency.
Group work requires rules, consent before spoken prayers that might be intense, clear lines for confidentiality, and an explicit agreement that spiritual experiences are interpreted, not idolized. If someone claims a sudden revelatory truth that demands major life changes from others, the group's default should be curiosity plus a request for time and counsel. The scroll favors steady discernment over charismatic dictums. The nightly review is the way the scroll measures progress. Spend 5 to 10 minutes each evening with 3 questions. Where did I notice kingdom frequency today? Where did debt loop me back into old patterns? What temptation smelled like a shortcut, and how did I respond? Journal a single sentence for each. The measure is not perfection, but noticing. After a month, read the entries and trace small trends. Are you forgiving earlier? Are temptations losing their glamour? Has one small act of aligned will been repeated until it feels natural? This is the empiricism of spirituality. The scroll asks that you be a careful eyewitness to yourself. There is a special calibration for leaders and institutions in your life. The hidden scroll is not a manifesto against churches. It is a corrective for practices that turn living words into rote forms. If you are in leadership, audit the systems you steward. Do your gatherings prioritize embodied practice, communal witness, and accountability? Or do they rely heavily on recital and spectacle? Start small. Add a 5-minute breath practice, a shared confession/forgiveness time that honors boundaries, and a protocol for naming possible false lights. Institutions can be vessels for kingdom frequency when they remember their function, to form people into faithful neighbors, not to manufacture appearances of holiness. I want to emphasize again, with pastoral urgency, that the linguistic angles I have offered, the Aramaic shading of Abun, the sonic imagination of a divine name as pattern, are interpretive lenses, not settled philological verdicts. Scholars and mystics will quarrel, and should.
What matters to the scroll's test is whether the practice produces transformation, calmer responses, more generosity, less reactivity, a clearer capacity for faithful risk. Practices can be true in function, even if the etymology is debated. The central moral pivot of all this is humility. The hidden scroll insists on humility because power that arrives without humility becomes a counterfeit. If you find yourself measuring spiritual status by experiences, fast for a season and return to the basics: bread, breath, forgiveness, seeing. Let your life be the laboratory. If you are tempted towards secret shortcuts, signs that you are special, use those as diagnostic points. They often indicate the very place the scroll seeks to reclaim. There will be resistance, expected. Old patterns are not neutral, they are protective systems. They resist because they have been keeping you alive in some narrower way.
When you begin to release debts and rename yourself, the family system, the workplace, the friend ecology may pull to reinscribe the old story. That is normal. The method here is patient repetition and community support. Keep a small team, one person who can speak truth, one who can pray with you, one who can help with practical steps, and hold fast to daily micro-practices. If you are tempted to skip the slow work in favor of one dramatic intervention, consider the long-term costs. Quick fixes often produce new chains, spiritual experiences that mystify the ego, faster recognition that the unreordered interior cannot hold. The scroll offers a long path, and the royalty it grants is functionally sustainable, a life you can steward without burning out or becoming cruel. Now, a compact set of exercises you can begin tonight. First, the anchoring breath. 3 times breathe in a way that expands the belly and collarbone. Hold a soft attention for a second at the top, and then exhale with the intention of releasing one small knot, a worry, an irritation, a micro-resentment. Name what you release simply. I set down the worry about X. Second, the daily bread commitment. Pick one tangible act of generosity for tomorrow and write it on a sticky note. Third, the forgiveness micro-practice. If you are carrying an interpersonal snag, speak a one-sentence release in a notebook and plan one concrete boundary step you will take to protect yourself. Fourth, the discernment pause. The moment an alluring option appears, delay action by consulting your 3 diagnostic questions and asking one trusted voice. Fifth, the renaming repetition. Each morning, speak your chosen true name into the mirror 3 times with breath between. Do these for 30 days and track in your nightly review any shifts. Expect the small, cumulative changes: less reflexive anger, a capacity to say no without self-betrayal, a steadier appetite for serving rather than consuming. The hidden scroll measures out over months, not headlines. There are specific practices for communal formation I want to hand you, because the scroll works best when amplified. Begin a small house or online circle called a sanctuary of practice. Commit to bi-weekly meetings with agreed protocols: the anchoring breath, 15 minutes of a single person's practice, 5 minutes of witness, and a final small commitment. Rotate leadership so no one person monopolizes interpretation. Keep a covenant of confidentiality and a shared resource chest: readings, interpretive notes, practices. Frame Sacred Scrolls, the resource this channel offers, as supplementary material for those who want deeper guides, not as a gatekeeping library. If your group resonates with the materials, use them. If not, adapt. This is a guided commons, not an exclusive priesthood. Now, hear this as an urgent summons. The hidden scroll is not a private hobby. It is a field activator.
When a cluster of people begin these practices and keep them, neighborhoods change. Sonorities of generosity overtake local cynicism. Patterns of retribution become less attractive because new economies of reciprocity are in motion. The technology here is fundamentally social: breath shared, deaths released together, identity witnessed publicly. This is why the small group model matters. It is where the hour stops being a theological abstraction and becomes a lived, mutual economy. Before we close, let us again hold certain guardrails with care. Do not present these practices as guaranteed cures for illness, sudden wealth, or miraculous fix-alls. That would be lying by technique. These practices change orientation, attention, and behavior, and so they change the field of possibility. People often experience increased resilience, clearer relationships, and a steadier sense of meaning.
Some testify to surprising provision or healing, and those stories are gifts. But the scroll's claim is not about promises, it is about an activated pathway. If you are moved to take the next step beyond these exercises, there is a resource available. A curated set of notes, annotated practices, and group frameworks I call the Sacred Scrolls. They are offered as interpretive tools, practical outlines that some groups have used to anchor their practice. They include guided breath sequences, forgiveness scripts that respect safety and justice, discernment checklists for leaders, and community covenant templates. If you decide to download them, use them as you would any map, for orientation and adaptation, not as an iron law. For those who resonate, there is also a private sanctuary group where we practice together, offer mutual witnessing, and troubleshoot real-life crossroads. It is a companion path, not a requirement for awakening. If you do choose to join, bring the willingness to be seen in small, honest ways, and the readiness to take consistent, modest steps. Membership does not confer superiority, it confers a circle of steady practice. Finally, a benediction and an activation. Place your hand over your chest and breathe with the bones of what you have learned. You have learned that prayer can be a procedure, that breath can be a sacrament, that forgiveness is a law of release, that temptation is often a counterfeit crown, and that deliverance is the careful work of naming and reclaiming. Let these words not remain intellectual possessions, but daily moves, a breath in the morning, a shared hour with someone you trust, a one-sentence nightly review, a refusal of a false light, a spoken new name in the presence of a witness. We close not with a slogan, but with a charge. Remember to keep the practices small enough to do and meaningful enough to change you. Return to the breath often. Let the name you are given by the Spirit be hallowed through your living.
If you would like the Sacred Scrolls and the Sanctuary community, follow the link in the description to explore them. Optional tools for those who wish to go deeper. May the work of remembering steady you. May the release of old debts free you. And may the kingdom's frequency find its home in your choices so that heaven's pattern is made visible through the life you are given to steward. Go gently and breathe as one.